Hi, this is Sally Wood for Be Inspired, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a slipcover for this style of chair. I actually have two to make, so the pattern I cut I will be reusing to make the second slipcover. It's quite a simple one, but I'll show you some techniques and why I do it and the way I'm going to do it. So let's get on with it. This cover doesn't have a right or a wrong side, so I'm going to have to make sure I know which is which. And I also need to make sure that I know where to line everything up. So just like in dressmaking, I'm just going to make some little marks. And I mark either side of any join. So there's that join. And I'm going to fold along that pin like that. Make sure it's nice and even. And mark there. I'm going to go midway along from here to the top, so round about here, again along the pin, make my mark. Then as I go around the top here, I'm actually going to cut the one side to fit the other like that. Makes life a little bit easier if you do it that way. Might not be perfect, but it will work out. On a pleat, cut either side of the fold of the pleat like this. Even if it's only narrow, then again either side of the pleat, fold along your pin and put your mark in. There's one, there's the pleat, and there's a pleat up here. So I'm going to put one along the top here, so it's midway. And then I'm going to mark both sides of this pleat like that. This comes out slightly, it's a little bit proud, so I'm going to cut that back. And then, and this is a really tiny pleat. So 1, 2, 3 pleats are in. Along the back here, I'm just going to fold along my pin and mark it. Make sure it shows. Sometimes you'll do it and it won't show. Here, as I come into this, I'm going to fold along here, and where it joins, I'm going to put a mark there, just a little clip, but I'm also going to put a mark along a pin here and a mark along a pin here. So it's marked either side of that join. I'm also going to mark here as I go along the underside of the back. Sometimes I forget to do it, so I try to do it as I hit any junction. So that's that. Then I'm going to come down the back, pop that pin back in for now, come down to about here. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this as the right side. So I'm going to put a pin there and then across. So when I remove this, so if I had to go away from my project and have taken all of this out, I still know which is my right side. I'm going to remove my pins in such a way that there's still marks in there. So I'm going to put a pin along that one so I know where that is. I'm also going to take this pin out so far, let the fabric drop, and then put it back in. The same with this one and the same with this one. Because I have cut these parallel with each other, I have no problem lining those back up. I'll just wind that in a couple of times like that. And again, I'm just going to work my way up this piece of fabric, dropping the fabric behind, popping the pin back in, dropping the fabric behind and back in. On this side where I've pinned it on here, I'm going to come across and I'm going to put a pin next to where it was like that, so I can take that one out, and I'm going to just pop that one back in. And again here, just going to pop this one in like this, just in the top fabric, turn it over and remove this pin enough to drop the fabric and pop it back in. And the same on this one. I have to be just very precise because I'm using this as a pattern to make another slip cover up. Now I'm going to go around here, drop the fabric, put that in. Now I've just dropped a pleat. When I drop a pleat, I put a pin in to hold the pleat, even though I'll be undoing it later. And now I'm just going to carry on going down this other side. I'm going to lay this out. I'm actually going to cut this back here because I don't need it. I will leave the length on here, straighten up just a little bit along here so I know that I'm putting straight edges to straight edges. Put this straight edge along here. I know that I'm cutting on the right side, partly because all my pins are on that side, also because I've got this cross here. That should all be more or less in place. Don't force it into position, just pat it into position. Now I'm going to make my new pattern. All I'm going to do is cut around exactly how it is. So there's my mark there, out. carry on going on up here. You could just cut on round like this and then cut your marks out. It doesn't really matter so long as everything is exactly how it is on the original cover that I've just cut. I only cut one piece out at a time, so if I had 5 of these to do, I'd cut 5 sides out, prep them, and then go on to the next part. I just find it easier to keep everything where it needs to be. Other people have their own methods of cutting more than one out. Before I forget, cut my little mark out there. Keep everything as still as you can. You know, if you're not sure, you could always pin it. I've been doing these for 20 odd years. Now I need to pull this forward so I can actually get it. Make sure it's nice and flat again. It needs to be in line, and then carry on going round there. Now it goes in slightly there, out. So if there's any really weird things that are going on, copy them. They might be on the other part of the cover. Goes a bit flat there, goes round there, but it does have a little in and out there. If you are to be cutting more than 2 out, make sure you always use the first one you cut out as the template. I'm going to cut this on through. As usual, I'm cutting up my piping at 1.5 inches because it's being sewn in. I'm going to put the piping together. I've got a long piece there. Obviously it doesn't matter which way it goes, up or down, because there's no right or wrong side. Slot that underneath there. My fabric's at right angles, and then I'm just going to go across from corner to corner. The length of the stitch is 2.6. I'm going to go across here. When I get to the other end, I don't have a right or wrong side, so I'm just going to pull that out and fold it like that. Put this at a right angle on top, and I'm going to slide that under there and carry on sewing. This particular project doesn't need very much piping, so I won't make very much up. Pull that out like that, place that way up for now. I always like to use a piping foot which has a groove in it. Pop the piping 1/2 inch in from the outside edge. Slide that underneath like that. Extend the straight stitch to the longest, which is a 5. Sew that in place. As I come in for the join, I'm going to split the stitching like that. Cut this back to about 1/4 inch from the sewn line. Open it up like that and flatten it out so it's nice and smooth. Carry on sewing it through. It's a light fabric, so I don't actually have to double check, but if it was a chenille or a velvet or something thick, always make sure it's really tight. Carry on sewing to the next join. I have 2 courses of action here. I could get a dressmaking pen and mark every point, but I'm not going to do that. I like my pins. This is how I was taught. that's my trouble. Where this pin is at the bottom, I'm going to put a pin across to mark where the piping is going to go for the skirt. Now I'm going to put this down on top like that. I'm going to measure each point. I'm going to just pop that under there for now. My start point, because it's going to vary, is between 5 and 6/8 of an inch. Hold on to that and measure to that point. I'm going to take that pin out. That's going to hold it up a little bit, but I can measure up for that. Sew up like that and get it on there. At this point, sometimes I have to move my tape measure along, so if I put it at number 1, is at about 1/4 inch in. Here again, I'm going to measure my 1/4 inch and I'm going to sew that part up. I know it's the right way up because I've literally just slid one across to the other. My next point of reference is about 1/2 inch from there, so I'm going to just move that to 1/2 inch, and it's quite a way, so I'm not going to be exact. I'm just measuring point to point. Get to there. Now I've just measured along the original, and it's as I come into the corner that it changes from a 1/2 inch to slightly narrower. So all I have to do with this one is just keep it running at the 1/2 inch, which fortunately is the width of the flange on my piping. When I get to the roll at the top, I'm going to just clip in like this, like you do in dressmaking, so you can go around corners. And I'm going to do quite a bit because I've got quite a big round area to do. If you're not sure how much, just roll it around like that and then do your end one and work forward. It's really up to you how you do this. And if you do too many or just go in portions, that's fine too. Having come around here, it comes out to 1/2 inch along the back here, so I will make sure that I do that. You just open those up like that. that. Rotate round, don't pull it, let the machine do the work, otherwise you will stretch your fabric. That's not good. Now I'm coming to the part where it's about 1/2 inch. Pull that in just a wee tad, like that, but still giving the roundness. And as I come round the corner, double check again, it comes in slightly here. Straighten your fabric out because you don't want to stretch it. Then in and around, so pull that there. And as I come round, I will just let the fabric straighten itself. It should go back into shape and down towards the end. Down the back side of this piece, I was a little bit more generous, so I'm going to make sure that I'm a little bit more generous on here. As long as it's even, it'll be fine. If it comes further in, just bring it in gently so it doesn't give you a wobble. As I get to the end, I know that I've got a skirt to put on, so I'm going to just cut this back. Not to the bottom because I don't need to, and I'm going to measure up from the bottom here. 1.5 inches is where the skirt goes in, so I need to cut that back a little bit further to give it enough room to work. So there's my 1.5 inches there, and I'll take the piping back about 1/4 inch there to about there, and I'll just sew that into place. Having done the second side, I'm going to put the first side under, move that along. Actually, I need to put those markings in. So I'll measure up and put those markings in on here because I'll need them later. And that one was 1.5 inches to there. So that's got that one going in there. And then this one is only 1.25 inches because it's at an angle. So I'll put 1.25, which is to there. Those are important. My second one is actually all together, and I'm going to repeat that on the first side. The first thing I'm going to do on this is cut back about 1/4 inch of piping. Pop that to start on that line, and I'm going to remove this pin here and slide it all underneath. Now it shouldn't have moved very much, so I'm just going to start sewing on up just a little bit. Remove that one. On here I can actually see where the pin marks are. It's like dot to dot, so from pin to pin mark. And I'm going to just work my way all the way round to the other side. I'm going to take these two out of here because I no longer need to know which is the right side. It's obvious. So I'll put those to one side. The next part I'm going to take out is actually the seat. See my pins there might not be particularly straight, but they'll work. I'm going to come in here about 1/2 inch and I'm just going to pull it on round like that. And the same on that side to about 1/2 inch of those pins there. I'm actually going to flip it because I can't see where the short side is. On the other side I can see where I've kind of matched it, and I'm going to match it up now, and I'm going to just round it like that so it's even all the way along the front and in. Now I am going to mark just like I did on the others. Run that pin there, put a mark there, this pin here, put a mark there. That should work, but I will actually put a mark in the center. The center one's just to make sure that both sides are going in equally. Find the skirt part's here, and to mark the top like that. Now I will take all the pins out because on this particular join it doesn't have to be very tight. Now I need to take this side out, so I'm going to mark the side like that. I can take those two and I'll put that one on there like that. That's for the base. So I'm going to just put a mark on the side here like that, and the same on the other side. Then I can undo these. Now I'm going to pop that back into the same hole and that into the same hole, and the same with that, and I will do the same on the other side. Again with the seat, this is obviously the upside. I am going to lay the straight edge along the straight edge at the bottom. Once it's in position like that, I am going to start cutting. So I'm just going to cut up here and in. I'm going to follow the shaping. This kind of shapes down and round. So I'm going to do the same here, round and then into that shape. So it corresponds with the other side. And again, take that little V out. I'm going to cut a little bit closer, it doesn't matter, but they'll both be even. I'm giving a generous seam allowance there of about 3/4 inch to the back. I'm going to pop that pin down then along here. Now notice I'm not actually moving anything at the moment, I'm just letting it do its own thing. Put these two in. This is the back of the seat, so those have to be exact. When I've done that, roll that, or concertina it I should say, so it doesn't move too much, and then move the whole piece across. You could pin it, probably be advisable to pin it, but it shouldn't have moved very much. I'll cut a little bit more along here because it's even from the front to the back. I'm not going to worry too much about that for now. Move my folded fabric like that, pick it up, move it across, move that across, re-push it into place. This is still level here, so I'm just going to cut up here, cut round here, and again straight up, giving a generous seam allowance on here for the piping. Having cut and marked all of the back, I have marked the right side of there, so I know that both right sides are facing up. Now the difference on this one is I am going to roll all of these back so I can see where my pin is, and I'm going to re-pin underneath like this, all the way across on the three sides. It'll make it easier later. So I'm going to put all of these in first while it's flat, then I can't make any mistakes. Now this is the corner that I'm going to be sewing in. I'm just going to put a couple of pins on here as well so that I can follow my markings up, separate them out. I need to put this corner in, so I'm going to just run my pins along the top of the ones underneath. Put that there to show where that is. If I pick these up, they should be in line like that. So the ones underneath I'm going to remove. I've lined the fabric up underneath exactly where it is, and I'm going to pop it on 3.5 would be fine, forward and back at the beginning like that, and then straight on up. These are only a guide, so I don't actually have to hit them exactly. And this one comes out slightly, so I'm going to just angle up on out like that. And when I get to the top here, I'm just going to angle it in slightly because that was a reminder to do so. Forward and reverse at the top. Now all I'm going to do is zigzag up here. Does a nice overstitch, and that's what I need. Now because this stitch doesn't do a reverse, I'm just going to put it into straight stitch and just overstitch where I finished there. And cut it back. The next part I'm going to take out is actually the inside and outside back, and here again I'm going to mark both with my cross so I know which is the right way. In order to get the outside back out, I do actually need to remove the side, so I'm going to just take all of these pins out like I did before, just drop the back until I've got all of this side out. As you make your way up, don't forget to fold over occasionally and put marks in because you're going to need those, especially at joins like here where you've got one coming up and then going into a second or third part. It's up to you whether you want to put the piping around this first before you tackle the back and the front. Just remember to put all your marks in, like the pleats at the top here, so that everything is where it needs to be. Remember to put a mark on the back side as well. These marks you'll find really useful. Along here where the center is, I would just mark the center on the top because that's where the pleat has to line up. So all three of those will join. So I've got mark there, and on the back, those will all join in together. Just remember, if you're taking a pin from the wrong side, take it out and very carefully put it back in exactly the same place as you've just taken it from. It just takes practice. Sometimes I'll put my fingernail there so I can see. This one is facing the wrong way, so I'm just going to take that one out and pop it back in like that. I've got my marks there, so again, take that one out and pop it back in. I'll make my way round. This is the second side. It has to come out anyway, that needs the piping all the way round. It's got to be done anyway, one way or the other. So this is the front, and this with the pleat is the back. I'm just going to take my pins out, pop them back in just on the top layer, facing the way that the piping is going to go on. I'll do the same with that one. It's sometimes awkward to get back in. As close to the original holes as possible. Now if you don't have big fat pins, some of these are, some of these aren't, the bigger pins leave a mark that you can do that with. And if you've got thin pins, what you can do is kind of make the holes bigger like that and then pop them back in. Either way works. You can actually use the pens that fade when either water is added or heat is added. So it's up to you. I'm cutting out the inside back. I've already cut across the front and put the marks in, and now I'm just going to carry on up and putting these marks in just the same. The pins that I've marked the pleats, I've put sideways again where each pleat is. As I come down like this, I'll make sure that little clips go in like that, and that I get all of these little clips in as well where all the pleats are. This is really important. I'll cut all of this side off and make my way around to the other side so all my information is in. Put pins back in where the pleats are. This is a visual reminder. Some of these are quite small. But this is the top, the inside top of the chair. Pop that down. It's on 5, the longest stitch. I'm just gonna sew along as I go. It's got a little bit of a curve to it, so I'll just try to put a gentle curve in, like that, and then into there. Got the centre mark marked there. It should go in quite smoothly. I've got the marks for either end of the pleat, so all I'm going to do is put those marks together to find the centre. Mark the centre, then I'm going to pleat those two together, so outside to centre on that side, pin it into place. This one here has to go into there. I'll sew those into place before I put them against the piping. So that's my pleat in. Now I've got the inside back here with the piping on and the outside back with the pleat. I'm just going to line this up. So here's my first mark. If I'm to lay that one out and that, they'd be different. So just make sure that everything is where it needs to be. It's all to do with the way it was shaped underneath the back of the chair. Now the only difference is I'm going to put this down to a 3.5 and the needle down to 3, so it actually cinches it in slightly. I'm just going to roll that on top of the other. Here's my centre mark here, which meets there. I'm going to hold those together because the outside back might be slightly different to this. So just pull this in, coming into the centre. Make sure that my pleat is as flat as I can make it. I don't want it rucked up. Pull that in like that. And now, oh, I didn't put the one in here, so I better find that one so that I know exactly where it is. Okay, so I've just come over there. I'll take those out because I don't need those anymore. And here's my mark that I'm going to match up here. So I'm going to pinch those two together. And you can see it's a little bit gappy here. Pull that in. So the back was actually slightly wider than the front. Because of the way I cut it, I shouldn't have to worry about anything. It should automatically go in. Straighten the fabric out underneath and on top if necessary. Sometimes when fabrics run like this, they tend to walk as well. And here again, I'm going away from this outside edge, so there was obviously a bit of shaping. Sewn the two together, and now I'm going to do my favourite zigzag. It's like an overstitch all the way along the back. So the foot is actually running along the inside of the piping. I say the inside, where it's been sewn. Trim back to the zigzag. I do this on slip covers. You never know whether people are going to actually take it off and wash it. If you seal everything, that means threads aren't going to unravel in that process. You don't want somebody complaining that their slip cover came apart. Not that I've ever had one come apart. I've been doing these for nearly 30 years now. So with luck, they're not going to start, but this makes a big difference. It also makes it sturdier. I'm going to put the seat on. So here's my piping. So this is obviously the top. That's a notification of pleats. So I'm going to carry on going down. And this is the bottom where the seat joint. Here, I have the corners in. So obviously this is the right side. Pop that down like that. Now I've got two cutouts here. That's for a reason. I'm going to put the second one together like that. And pop it underneath on a number 3. I'm giving it a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across. Forward and back, let it arc out, get to my first mark. Here's my centre marks. I'm going to hold those equal. And actually it looks, I might be able to do that. One's slightly bigger than the other. But if I pull the bottom, it should pull in. I'm not pulling very hard, just a little bit. If it wrinkles too much, I'll flip it over. No, it looks like it's going to go in. I'm actually going to flip it, put the seat underneath. Here again, I've got 2 marks. I'm going to put it on the second mark like that. Again, 1/2 inch. Forward and back. Find the center. Oh yeah, that works way better. I'm putting a little bit of tautness on, but not too much, and I'm going to let it run again. Sometimes it's better if you flip it over, but we'll see. Make sure the outside edges are together and they match, but I'm going to carry on sewing to where I finished off a second ago. The next one I'll put in with the seat down and the back on it. Just gone over a few stitches. Now again, I'm going to pop it back underneath to there, and I'm going to do my zigzag that I rather like all the way along this edge. Now I'm running the original seam just under the side of the foot, so it's nice and even. That means that the stitch is not going to go all the way over the edge of the fabric. I find if I do that, it sometimes wrinkles the fabric up, and I don't want it to do that. I want it to stay flat. Cut in like that, because I need this to be as close to where it was originally, because it needs to line up with the outside of the chair. Cut this seam allowance back to the zigzag all the way across the back of the seat and back where it joins together. I am just going to put all my pleats back in like this. When you're sewing the pleats in, just keep the outside edge of the fabric running along the outside edge of your sewing foot, and it's up to you if you want to put stitches all the way along. I tend not to. I tend to just clip them out and then put them in separately. Everybody has their own way of doing it. If you wanted to, you could use like a stay stitch, put it on a number 5 stitch length, as in dressmaking, just pull it in. Here's the third one going in on this side, and I'll do the 3 on the other side of this chair. Starting at the front of the chair where it's sewn in, pull that forward, and this is the chair seat, and this is when the magic starts to happen. Here is the chair back, and you can see it's arched. That will poke down where the chair seat and the back meet. It's not very deep, but it's enough to hold it. We take one of the swirly bits that goes around the side of the chair, and I am going to pin that to this side. Because it goes up and out, I need this side to be pinned. So although actually I don't really pin it, but I will for this application. I'll just pop that there. I'm going to pin from the back of the piping down, inside back here, which gets lined up with this one, and you can just pin it all the way up, or not. You don't have to pin it up. I'm just going to put those 2 pins in to start off with. It's easier if you don't pin it all the way around, because you don't know how it's going to go in here. It should go in evenly, but not necessarily. But I will pin up to this point here from the piping side down. You do it this way because it's easier to use this for rolling the extra fabric into. You'll see it's slightly gappy. All of that will come in. Before I slip this underneath, I'll show you something. This is the first join, and it goes at right angles. Imagine that's the side of your chair going up, and this is the top. It comes into this join at right angles, so you need to try to keep it at right angles. My advice is always to push this chair seat up against the back rather than the other way around. If you do it the other way around, you'll have problems. So make sure your chair seat is being put like that, and if you can, just pull it out without any pleats except for where this seam is. You can pleat it there. So let's start here. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom and start right here, because that's where the piping will be going across. Got my stitch on a 3 and my stitch width at a 3 also, which means it's going to cinch in towards the piping. Line up the first nick and start sewing. Sometimes needs a little bit of help to get the piping actually into the groove, but once it's there, it works. I'm now pulling up evenly to the groove. Pull the fabric around. Make sure that my seat is where it needs to be, under there. And I'm going to put a little bit of tension on it, but not very much. Doesn't need any, really. It's all under there. This here is even. If I folded that back, it would be more or less even with there. Kind of goes in a little bit, but not too much. That's good enough. You don't want it moving around too much. Go across your join up to the next nick, which is here. Pull that up, pull that into place, and sew. From here to the next nick, it's a little bit gappy. I'm holding it up. You see this goes underneath. So what I'm going to do is gently put a bit of tension on that, and it should all go in nicely. Do it in sections. This part here comes out. It lines up with this part here that also comes out and then in. So that's the first part I'm going to get in. Having got there, I'm going to straighten out my fabric again. Now from now on, I'm going to put tension on. Pull the top. Make sure your raw edges run parallel because that was the way it was cut when you cut it on the chair. What happens is the dog feet cause the fabric underneath to be pulled into place evenly. I'm going to pull that out so I've got more ability to move. My neck here is almost in line with that, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a tug. Hold it above and then it should all go in. When I say above, you see it's only just touching. And I've got control over this. I can move that. My arm's on the other, so that's holding it in place. As I get there, the neck and the fabric are in line, so I'm going to put my finger pushing down on both fabrics to hold it in place so it won't move. And I've just got there. The next nick is here. I'm going to roll this fabric like that, so it's going up into a curve, and I'm coming into the curve with the pleats. Make sure all of these bits of fabric are facing forward towards the raw edge. Line up the next nick, which is here. Line up the raw edges of the fabric. Pull this fabric towards me a little bit and then sew. Sometimes you need to push the fabric down into place because you don't want any wrinkles. As I get to this nick, I'm twisting the fabric around towards the raw side. Here's my first pleat, make sure that, and all the fabric is facing forward like that. Line up this nick with this one. I know it's a little way ahead, but it helps you twist the fabric into shape. Lift up the fabric that has already gone through and bring that towards you on the other side. And again, once you get over the first pleat, move your fabric forward like that. This nick and this one are slightly out of kilter, so I'm going to pull on the top and let the bottom run. Raw edges together. Might not be an absolute match, don't worry about it. This fabric comes out here. My next pleat is here. Straighten that up so it is pleated. Push that in. Now the raw fabric comes round. This piece comes out and it comes out here. So that's my next line that I want to get into place. Pull the top fabric against the bottom. And it's just about there. Once I go over the pleat, it should be in line. If it's not, don't worry too much, it's close enough. Carry on sewing a little bit further. That's where the fabric comes out, that's where that comes out. Again, I'm going to push all the fabric underneath. There's nothing worse than getting some of that caught under there. Here's my next groove and here's my next groove, and that's quite a ways around like that. So I'm going to roll the top fabric into place, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to just straighten this out slightly, keeping the raw edges together. There's a little bit of fabric doing its own thing there, but that's okay, just as long as this all comes in line here. Push that into place. This wrinkles up, that's fine. As I come round, these two nicks should roll in together. This is why I don't pin all the way down, because you're constantly moving the fabric. Make sure all of that's going where it needs to go, and on round. And it just about reaches there. Now, the other thing that I like to do is to have the seam for the piping to go up. Put that into place now so I can get there and know that it's already where I want it to be. I've lined the two grooves up there and they will go in nicely, I think. I'm just pushing the fabric into place. Make sure everything's going with the direction it needs to. So I've completed the rounded part, and now I'm going to pull this into place like that. It doesn't have to go all the way to the edge because the most important part is to line up this side and this side. So you kind of wriggle it so it goes into shape. It should hit the cover but not the piping cord, it'll be easier. So I've brought it forward slightly. I'm going to make it go as close as I can to there. Pull it over. You're going the other way now, so you don't want this to pleat. All you have to do is fan the back side out so it's flat. For some reason I only have a nick on this side but not on that side. Now this is why when you cut things, you cut them and keep the shapes evenly, because all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this shape here into place like that. It comes out, it goes in. So that is my mark that I'm going to be looking for. Pinch that together, pull that out, and keep all of the raw edges in line. It's not gappy, so I don't have to pull it too much, just so it's even. So on down. Hold that tight enough to hold it even. And here again, just stop and start as often as you need to, because the fabric wants to do its own thing. You'll find that sometimes the fabric underneath gets caught on the sewing machine bed, and then when that happens it doesn't want to go into line. Now I'm getting to where the fabric flares out, straighten that up like that so it's over the side of my ironing board. I'm going to just realign where that flares out there, pinch it back together again, and sew to the end. There's the end of my piping. I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch above there and do forward and reverse. I have the skirt to add on, so that's why I'm stopping there. This second side I'm going to line up. Here's my first groove. It's level with here. I'm going to take that pin out from the bottom, I don't need that. Start sewing about 1/2 inch up from the bottom, so about here. Again, I'm going to do forward and reverse. Line the first grooves up together. When I get there, line the second ones up together. That's just before it goes round into the shaping for the top of the chair. Hold those together and sew that into place. This is the top of the outside back. This is the top of the inside. Make sure that the flange and seam for the piping is facing up. That's just my personal preference. You might prefer to have it going the other way. As I come in, I'm going to pull that so it's level, and the nick for the top is a little bit further forward than here, but I think by the time I pull it in, it should all line up. As I come round, this sometimes wrinkles in the wrong direction. That has gone in line. I'm just going to pull this back so the raw edges are in line. Get to that neck. Make sure all of your seam is facing the raw edge. Sometimes these get caught underneath and it might be like that and you think you've got it and there's such a pain to get back out. The next nick is here. I roll that up. It's almost in line, so by the time I get there it should be in line. Just because that goes out, don't pull it back so it's in line and pull it forward, you'll go out of line. So you're not pulling every little bit into place, you're pulling lengths into place. And there's my nicks, they're in line. Pull this back slightly so that it all lines up. Now I'm at that neck, I'm going to pull all this fabric towards me, straighten this fabric up so it's in a line as much as I can. Again, I'm going to just roll all of those raw sides together, make sure all of those little bits are facing forward, pull the fabric, realign. I'm coming to my first pleat, so I need that in line. I usually rework the pleats, just kind of wriggle them slightly. Get on top of the pleat and work out where your next clips are. One's here, not quite where I want them. I'm going to pull it into place. If it doesn't line up, I'm not going to worry too much. Sometimes they don't. Just keep tension on the piece with the piping and not on the other. So now here's my next section. It didn't really need to be pulled that tight because here I've got a nick here and here is another one. So I should be able to line those up and then it will be back into order. Move the fabric that's going around towards you as you go. It's wanting to twist. So if it does that, pull your fabric back the other way. I might have to go back over that little part. As I get there, it was almost in line. I'm going to pull this right over because we're going down a straight edge. Make sure all of those little bits are facing forward. And hopefully, as I go down, so I'm going to line those two nicks up, wriggle the fabric like that, and line that up. Line the rest of the fabric up because it kind of gets caught round like that. My nicks are in line. I'm on the last stretch, so I'm going to have this nick and this nick lined up. It's a little bit loose on the bottom side, but I'm going to just pull it in as tight. Okay, so I've got my nicks lined up, and as I'm sewing, like I did before, lining up my raw edges where they go in and out, because that's how it was cut. Now as I get closer, I'm just going to pull the top and adjust the bottom because it's going out slightly. So pull that in. So I'm still pulling on the top so there's no wrinkles. Sorry, I'm at the bottom where the seat is. Again, I'm going to just make sure that that seam is down and this folds up. It's going to go in like that. There's my neck, so I'm going to actually pull that down so it matches. And that, with a bit of luck, should all go in. Pull it back slightly so it curls round. And then I'm going to just let it swing into place. Always keep an eye on where your fabric is going because it does walk, especially on corners like that. On this side, because it's the front side, attaching the seat, I'm going to remove this pin here and I'm going to sew all the way down to the bottom. You don't have to do forward and back. The point where I stopped sewing on the back side of this side piece, I'm going to just pop it underneath and I'm going to do the overstitching all the way round, and then I'll flip it and do it on the other side too, just like I did on the back. Now as you go round the arched top. Just make sure all of the fabric is in the right direction. Doesn't get caught underneath, sometimes it does. And make your way all the way around there. You can see the top wants to wrinkle underneath the foot as I go. Try to keep it so it goes in as smooth as possible. This will go all the way down to the front side of the seat, so it has to go all the way to the bottom. Now again, on the back side where it's longer, depending on how you've done it, I mean you might have put it as a short back on there, but I'm using the back as part of the skirt. I'm just going to finish off just about 1/2 inch to 1 centimetre above the base there. I will cut all of the excess off, but try not to cut the zigzag stitch. If you do, just go back, re-stitch over it. It's easily done because it's right on the edge where you want to be cutting. I'm going to be putting the piping on that goes around the top of the skirt, so I'm going to line that up with that pin there, which I'm going to remove. I've also cut back the piping on the inside, and I'm going to bring that just in front of the end here, so it's a nice cross section. Start sewing along here. You can put it on the longest stitch. We're just going to be galloping around here. Here's the end of the piping which goes onto the skirt, so I'm going to pop that there. Start putting that into place. This is why you don't take this all the way down. If I'd cut this so that there was piping on the back, then I would have gone all the way down, but I didn't. I've done it this way. I'm just going to pull this round. On the back, piping flange goes that way. On the front side, it also goes that way. It fits better on the chair if you do that. Here's my first pin, and take that one out. Now the thing to remember on here is let it go in evenly. So it's very easy to pull the bottom out. Don't. Just rest the piping on top and carry on sewing. When you put the pins in to mark it, with a bit of luck, you didn't pull the fabric out of shape. Line it up with where the pins came out of. It should arch a little bit. Any threads, pull them down, line it up. At the first corner, make sure that the fold is coming forward. Straighten out your fold like that, and you'll notice that it might not look like it's going in straight. Usually the piping kind of curves up a bit, and that's normal because of the way the seat goes in. Almost there. I'm going to take these two out. The corner should be the apex, so I'm going to start bringing the piping on round and then down and around. Follow your pins, otherwise you'll have piping that droops at the corners. Continue to the other end. Here again, I've cut this to the back end here. This just misses the piping, and I'm going to sew into this edge here in a straight line. Just straightened out this as well as I can. I'm going to lay this down like this. What you can see is the back comes down here, and then it turns into the skirt, which means I'm going to measure the length from the base of the skirt to the base of the piping, which comes to 15.5 inches, plus 1/2 inch for the seam. For the allowance here makes 16. So I'm going to cut a length of fabric 16 inches. Now this is the bit I'm going to use for the skirt. I'm just going to cut the hem off that's here. I'm coming in a little bit because it's very wonky, and I'm going to just cut all the way using the threads as a guide so I get it nice and straight. Go all the way across this piece of fabric. Then I'll measure up and cut my 16 inches off. Before you put the skirt on, trim back any extra fabric from here. It's easier to follow if it's level with here because this is about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that's what you need. Work your way around so it's nice and tidy. Try to keep it as even as possible. There'll be places that it's not that even. Just straighten it up. The piping coming down behind and the piping for the skirt, and where this intersects, which is just about here, you're going to have to bring the back side of the fabric down and into place. You mustn't sew further down. If you sew further down than that, say to the bottom here, you won't be able to get your skirt in. You should only sew to just above these stitching. If you sew slightly above, that's fine. But as I say, just don't go below that line. That's your cut-off line. I've just popped this underneath. That's the back of the skirt, and this is the side coming down. Always make sure that your piping is actually going up because you want all of the sewing for the skirt to be facing down. And I can see where my intersection is. It's right here. The other thing I'm going to do is just line that up with that so it's nice and sharp. Sew down to that corner. It might push up and it might not want to go over because there's quite a bit of bulk. I think I'm where I need to be. If you need to, leave your needle down, pick the foot up and check. And I'm about a stitch up from there, which is close enough. Reverse, which usually means a stitch forward, so it's better to be behind that line than in front. I'm going up the other side, so I've made sure that all of that is as straight as possible. Slide that under the foot, eyeball where that join is. If necessary, put the needle down so you can see. Not all the way down, that's about right. Forward and reverse. And then just enough to go to the original stitching. When you're cutting back, cut just above where your stitching is for the piping, like that, towards the piece that you're taking out, and then just cut down and cut that out. Do that on both sides. Leave that back skirt behind, cut back all of the excess fabric to the piping all the way around. I've cut in slightly at a slight angle on this one. That's going to twist when it all goes in. I realise the information is like mud at the moment, it doesn't make sense, but that's okay. This is the back skirt. Here is the skirt that I'm going to put on. If I had fabric with right sides, I would, floral or something, I'd say right sides together. In this case, it's whatever's facing up on the outside is the right side if it's plain fabric. So right sides together. I'm going to slot it under here. I'm just going to do forward and reverse, and all I'm doing is running the outside raw edges against the side of the foot. I want a narrow seam where the skirt is concerned. The reason you don't cut the top of the skirt off here on the back side is because you need it. So I'm going to sew all the way to the top. Again, forward and reverse. And then back down to the beginning and put your zigzag on. You don't want anything coming apart. And now I've got the skirt attached, or starting to be attached. I'm going to measure off at least 12 inches of this length here. That should give me a nice 3-inch pleat on both sides. So that's my 12 inches. Now here, I'm going to mark that off as my 12 inches. Just double check, always double check. I'm able to measure on here. So I've got the seam where it joins the back there, and then straight across. Actually, that's a generous 12 inches, so I'm going to pull that in slightly. Here's the back side of the fabric for the chair that comes down, and here is the side view, and this is where the skirt goes on. I'm just going to pull all of this out. It's not a very straight edge on here, so I'm just going to cut down as straight as I can. I can just about make out where the weaving is. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of here. Okay, so I have part of the skirt here, and I'm going to join it on the side. Now here's the skirt side here, and the back that comes all the way down here, and this is what I'm going to be joining it to, the back side of the skirt. I'm going to start at the bottom like this, and I'm going to run the raw edge on the side of my foot there. The stitch length is on a number 3, and I'm just going to do forward and reverse. I'm going to make my way all the way to the top of the skirt. At the top of here, I really didn't give myself very much fabric to mess with, so it's going to be really quite tight. Cut that back there. Oh, I don't want to cut all of that back. Ooh, Now, so what's going to happen is I'm going to run out of fabric to sew the skirt to. If this happens to you, don't worry about it. Just get the seam as close to the top as you can. This is not uncommon, and this is why I did one side with plenty of fabric and one side not, so that I could show you. I'm literally going to put this in as close to the top as I can, which might not be very close, and then reverse. Make sure it's secure, and then I'm going to zigzag along here too. So again, I'm going to work from the bottom to the top, and again, just take it as close to the top as you can get it. It might be closer because you're further onto the edge of the fabric. I've managed to get all the way to the top. Now this is where people get a little bit confused, because this is quite a big intersection of fabric. I'm going to explain it to you. I've just attached this to the bottom of the back here, so it just carries on going. Here's the side as it comes in and intersects, and this is the seat. This will be going on round. Pull this out slightly like that. So from here where this intersects across, I've just measured off 12 inches, and I'm just going to put a pin right there at that mark. Because I'm going to be sewing from the top down, I'm going to fold this over so that the raw edge of the skirt and the raw edge of the seat run together. I'm going to take this pin and I'm going to pop it right back here where everything intersects. Line that up, roll it out and pin it. Just for now. All this extra fabric I'm pulling to the back. I'm going to slot this right under here. I'm going to start sewing where the back intersects with the skirt. So it's on a number 3 stitch length. The stitch width has been cinched in slightly. You can do forward and reverse if you want. I usually do. I'm just going to carry on sewing. Sometimes when you get to the joins where the piping is, you need to lift the foot slightly, push the fabric under and then start again. It sometimes doesn't want to lift with these piping feet. As I come into the first corner, here's the seam for the front of the chair. I'm just going to sew until I get level with the seam that comes in and intersect. When I'm almost there, I'm just going to do a quick reverse and stop. There's 2 ways you can do this actually. I'll show you the easiest. I'm going to measure back from my seam 3 inches and put a pin in. That's where your fold mark is going to be. I now have a fold mark for my fabric. I'm going to just roll the fabric in line so that it's absolutely in line with that seam. Fold my fabric back to my fold line and then forward again. Just pinch it all in. Slot everything underneath your sewing foot, and when you've got it, just remove the pin from behind. I'm going to do 2 stitches forward, then I'm going to reverse back over my folded fabric. So there's my fold, and I'm just going to sew forward. Now try to keep all the fabric underneath smooth. Just kind of helps everything to follow through if it's like that. Now I'm almost at that seam. I'm going to measure from the fold back, pop a pin in at 3 inches, which is where you're going to fold your fabric from. Pinch your fabric into place like that. Roll it into the fold of the fabric here. Make sure it's snug. Don't fold it over the front of the pleat. Just make sure that it's snug and butted up against there. Put your fabric back down and then sew over the join. As you get to the fold here where your pin is, remove the pin and then carry on sewing forward, and then we repeat at the next corner. This is my second corner, and this is the amount of fabric I've got left. I need to make sure that the new seam is within the pleat, so I'm going to measure that back 3 inches and fold. Of course, I've been doing this a long time, so that's probably about not very far off. It's 3 1/4. It doesn't have to ever be exact. Anywhere between 3 and 4 inches is fine. 2 inches is a bit skimpy and they don't tend to hold straight. So I'm going to put this side of my pleat in, and then I'm going to work out the other side of my pleat. Just double check everything before you start setting things in place. I'd come over too far, so I'm going to pick that up, slide that across so it's nice and tight. The front of my pleat is in position, and now I've just got to reposition the underside of the pleat. Back underneath, a couple of stitches forward, and then to the front, and I'm going to stop right there. It's a little way back. This is the other side of the back. I've got the back coming in here, the side there. I've already sewn in the skirts here and zigzagged it. I've already measured up for my 12 inches and put that into position. And I'm just going to roll this to the front edge here. Now I'm where the join is going to be for the front of the skirt. So having done that, I'm going to just pop a pin in here, which I will be removing shortly. I know it's upside down, so it's a little bit awkward. This is the seat top. Fold that there, bring it back about 1.5 inches to here. I'm going to cut this extra fabric off. So here's my pin, here's my clip. If you want to, you can draw a line down there, you could fold the fabric back. There's any number of ways you can cut a straight line. So actually, I've just folded that over and made that in line, and I'm just going to cut down the fold of this fabric like this, which is actually a very good way of doing straight line. Here's the piece that I want off. Because both sides of here is 3 inches, that means I've got 6 inches in the pleat. I've already cut 1.5 inches off here, so I'm only going to cut 5.5 inches to go in. All I'm going to do is measure from this corner here like that to 5.5 inches, which takes me to there. And I'm going to cut this length of fabric off now. So I've just folded that piece over as well, cut down and get rid of that. Then zigzag it all the way to the top like you have previously. Now I've still got my pin marking where the end of this is pleated, which I'm going to remove. I'm going to bring all of this fabric forward like that. Let's pop this underneath first. It's kind of loosely under there. There's the seam we've just put in. And I'm going to make sure that the raw edges are into the pleat. Butt that pleat up against this one, like that. Fold the fabric into place. If you want to, you can make sure that you've got a 3-inch or thereabouts pleat, and it's 3 inches. And then I'm just going to carry on sewing to the end. Make sure all the raw edges are level. That certainly helps the pleats stay level when they're in there. I am going to bring this stitching in to join the piping that's just coming down from the side of the chair. It doesn't make much sense until you see it when it's finished. When I get almost to the end of the piping, I stop and reverse. All I'm going to do is push both parts of the fabric together and find my halfway mark, which is here. With the halfway mark, put that on the end there. I will adjust it. I'm going to straighten all the fabric out that's underneath first, so it's all running in the right direction. This pleat here has to move forward so that it is in line with the piping, like that, which actually brings that forward a bit. I'm going to sew that into place. Now make sure all of your raw edges are in line, otherwise it will go wonky. Slot it underneath, sew towards this pleat. Double check that it's in line with the piping here. Seems to have moved a bit. Set over slightly from the end of the pleat, not that I can really show you. Reverse first. Once you've reversed, sew forward. Just make sure the top of the back side of the pleat is level as you come into the piping. Stop just before you get there. As I do the second side of the pleat, I'm going to make sure that the fabric goes hard up against the pleat on this side. You can't really see it from here because it goes in at an angle, but it's like that underneath. The raw edges need to be facing up, and I also turn the seam of the pleat so that the seam's actually facing where the pleat is starting, so it's hidden. Then with all the back fabric pulled back like that, so there shouldn't be anything in there, I'm going to sew straight across with my 1/2 inch seam allowance along the top here. Doesn't need it, but I'm going to do forward and reverse anyway. Open this to make sure it's gone where it needs to. Here's my pleat, here's the other side, and when I pull both of those down, it all lines up. It's a little bit awkward. Sometimes you might have to take a couple of goes to get it in correctly. So on the other side of this skirt, if I pull the fabric like that, you can see the top of the piping coming in and the cross. Again, I'm going to just divide my pleat in half. Bring that centered down to where the piping and the back join. Make sure that all of that is even and slide that underneath the foot. It's pulled it forward. It does take a little while to make sure that that pleat is exactly where it needs to be. Maybe it needs to go back a little bit. Just double check. No harm in double checking anything. Once you're satisfied, make sure all of those raw edges are on the top. Reverse first, and then I'm going to go forward. The reason I don't go forward first is because it will push everything forward, and I don't want that to happen. As I get to this corner, I'm going to push all of this fabric underneath the back, and I'm going to line all of this up. So here, where the seam is, I'm going to roll that into the pleat. And because it's on the edge, it should give it a little bit of body. Then I'm going to roll the two pieces of raw pleat together like that, sew all the way across. It's very important that everything else under there is pulled all the way to the back so it's smooth across here, and then give it the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now when you get to the other end of the skirt, I am just going to push all of that underneath like that. Make sure that your raw edges and everything are in a line, and the rest of the fabric is pushed back, just like when you first started on the skirt. Go over the join and carry on right to the end. The next part I'm going to do is the skirt, and I usually start with the back of the skirt, and I try to line up my pleats, and I will iron both sides of the pleats like this. Try to make them even. It's easier if you've got stripes because you can see where those go up and down. Now once the back of the pleat has been ironed in, I then iron the front up like this. I've just done that side and I'll line up that, make sure that that is straight. Bring those together and iron that into place too. And I will slowly, I'll work round to the other pleats as I get there. Now I don't usually do all of the skirt at the same time. I'll do that shortly when I put the hem in. When you have the back pleats in place where you want them, pin along the top of them. There's nothing holding them at the moment into place, they'll just droop. I'm going to put this on. I don't want to be stretching the back, so what I'm going to do, pull it so that all those pins are on the underside, and I'm going to just ease it over the top. If these pins work, that means I've got everything in the right place, and then just work it down until it fits. These are pulling slightly, which I'm a little bit concerned about, but this isn't. I'm thinking as I get this down into position, it should come into place. It just takes a while, and some fabrics don't work very well against each other when you're pulling them. The fabric underneath is like a denim, but it's a bit like a brush cotton, so it's really snagging on the fabric that I'm pulling over the top. Because this is a little bit bulky over the original skirt, I'm going to leave this open for now, but I will adjust these. In fact, I think I got those in the right place. So I'm actually going to put a button on each side, and I might put one in the middle and put little loops on here to hold it once it's in place. Along the bottom, I'm just going to fold the fabric to about 1/4 of an inch above the table and pin it all the way around. Because this is a lot looser than I had planned, it means that it sags a little bit in the middle, so it will undulate. So you don't want that happening, otherwise you'll have a big swathe of fabric that's just lying on the ground. So you need to take that up. I'm not sure how she wants the back. So I've taken the centre pleat out, it didn't work. I've pinned across the bottom so it's level, and that's where I'm going to put the new hem. Once you've worked out your hem, measure it up and work all the way around the base of the skirt until it's all in place. And if you've got a second one, make sure that that is also measured to the original one. Whatever measurements I've got on here, I'm going to put on the next one so they're both even. Here's my hem. I'm just going to fold that raw edge into the fold that's been ironed, pop it under. Now I'll always start centre back and work my way around. The stitch length is a 3.5, but 3 would be fine. As I go around this first curve, and I'll say curve because it was cut slightly differently on the back, I'm just going to ease all of that raw edge into that fold, and it should go in quite smoothly. And then on round. Now when you get to the joins on the seams, you can cut right the way back at the bottom and just angle it out to just under where it has been folded and pressed into the seam. That takes quite a bit of the bulk out, makes it a lot easier as you go into the pleats. I expressed to you it's very important to check your seams. And here one of those little things has got caught on the outside. If that happens, see if you can pull it from the outside like that. Most of that's come out. And I'll be able to cut back the rest of these in a minute. Also check that your seams have gone in tightly. I'm going to have to redo this one. This is not uncommon when you're coming around curves for them to do that. So always go back and check. This is the last corner as it goes into the back. And as you can see, I have sewn it, but I sewed it so I could show you. I'm going to have to take this back one up, which means I'm going to put a pin on the back end of that pleat. I'm going to undo it to here and sweep the underside up and across and then up. So it's going to be a little bit of a zigzag. It will go in. It'll be fine. When you've made any adjustments, pull the new hem into line and just press it into place. I found it easier to just sew everything where I think I need it than to mess around. But I've been doing this a long time. If you feel confident putting all these in first off, then you can. But I always to caution and do it bit by bit. So I'll trim this back and then fold that back in and start again from here to here, and it should look pretty good. This is the hem that I've just reworked. It goes up and around, should hang nicely on the chair. I'm laying this flat along here and I'm going to measure out 3 inches, and here is where I'm going to put the shaft of the button right at the top. My initial cut is going to be just 2 or 3 stitches, and I go up and down, not sideways. Now the shaft of the button should fit through that hole without any problem. Pinned all the way through to hold everything in place. The shaft of the button just about shows through here. I've got a piece of wadding and I'm also going to put a hole through there too, like that. This is so that when everything is sewn together, it won't wobble. It's really important, otherwise you're going to have a button that does its own thing. Just change the way that pin is. The shank of the button is there. It goes through my piece of wadding like that, and I'm just going to sew this to it. It is really awkward to do like this because there's quite a bit of bulk. Once you get it started, it's fine. And I usually just do 3 stitches all the way through. Certainly get that shank sewn in. How you do it otherwise is up to you. Thank you for joining me on this project. I hope that I was able to impart some useful information to you about making a slipcover for a parson's chair. Slipcovers are not meant to be tight fitting. They're called slipcovers for a reason, because they slip over the original furniture. They're not upholstered, so you will have a little bit of peaks and ripples, but that's okay. Just remember the excess fabric that you cut on the back pushes down hard into the join of the back and the seat of the chair, and that should hold it. I think this lady's going to be pleased with her new chair cover. If you'd like to see more from me, please subscribe and hit the bell button, and in the meantime, take care. See you later. Ciao.